So, welcome to the next Nestor interview via either podcast, or if you can see the video, then you're at YouTube, because we also have video. If you're listening to the podcast, you can always go to YouTube and watch us while we are talking to each other. And today, this is all about the Digital Preservation Coalition. I have one co-moderator from Nestor, Katharina Markus from ZB Met.
Yes, correct.
Yes, and we have from the Digital Preservation Coalition Sarah Middleton and William Kilbride, and I'm Yvonne Tunnat from ZBW in Kiel and Hamburg. So, Ina, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. So my full name is Katharina Markus, short name Ina Markus. I'm working at ZB Med, Information Center for Life Sciences in Germany, Cologne, and I'm head of digital preservation over there. And then I will hand over the ball to Sarah.
Hello, yes, thanks for having us. My name's Sarah Middleton. I'm the Chief Community Officer for the Digital Preservation Coalition, or the DPC. I'm based in York, in the north of England, and I've worked for the DPC for nearly 12 years now, so woo! It's all been good fun. I'll pass over to William to introduce himself now.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. My name is William Kilbride. I'm the Director of the Digital Preservation Coalition. It's great to be speaking to you, Yvonne and Ina, today with Sarah. And so I'm based here in Glasgow, in Scotland. I've been with the DPC since February the 23rd, 2009. So perhaps just as this comes out, perhaps we'll be approaching that anniversary.
Yeah, it's great that you're here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, we were looking forward to pose some detailed question to you about the DPC, but maybe first we should just ask you what, in short, the DPC is doing and what's the goal of the DPC.
Sure, I can start off by telling you a little bit about that. So the DPC, the Digital Preservation Coalition, it's an international coalition and a network of organisations, basically, who are all working together on digital preservation. We are vendor and technology neutral. It's important to say that. We're not selling code or storage or solutions. We work with the agencies that do that, but they're not part of the coalition itself. So that means we can be quite direct and impartial. And when we celebrate a product or a project, or when we direct people to a solution, it's because we believe it works, not because we are invested in it necessarily. And then when we argue for investment from government or for policy that favours preservation, it's not for our shareholders. When we publish development roadmaps or requirements, it's not because they're easy or profitable, but it's because our members need them. So we do everything on behalf of our members. And community actually is at the very core of the DPC and what we do. And we're often told that that's the best bit about being part of the coalition, because it's the support that the members can offer each other. So after all, it's they that have the expertise and they that have these experiences that they can share with each other to help each other. So as the DPC staff, we do our best to facilitate that kind of welcoming and inclusive global community, so we can work together on creating a sustainable future for our digital assets. That's our strapline. And through this community, we enable our members to deliver resilient, sustainable, useful, long-term access to digital content and services, and helping them to access and use digital materials in whatever form they need them for as long as they need them. So that's kind of the goal. And we also raise awareness of strategic, cultural, technological challenges which our members face. And as I said earlier, we do this independently of the solution providers who operate in the field. So we're vendor neutral in everything we do. And so we encourage collaboration, really, for mutual benefit, let's say.
Yeah, mutual benefit, that sounds good. And I think I've always known the DPC to some extent, because you were already there when I joined the ZBW 14 years ago. And since a very long time, you're also loosely working together with Nestor, maybe 10 years or so. Might that be right?
Yeah, I'll maybe take a bit of the history here to describe how the DPC came about. So, formally, the DPC was founded in 2002. So it probably is almost exactly, around the same time as Nestor was coming into existence. It was set up originally by a group of agencies in the UK and Ireland who were in a variety of different ways working on this shared issue of digital preservation. And they realised that each of them were trying to solve the same broad set of questions, or they were facing the same challenges when arguing for investment from government, or struggling to recruit staff. So there were a kind of key set of challenges in front of the DPC. It became obvious in around 1996, 97 that this needed coordinated action. That led to a call in 2000 at a conference in York, actually, where I first met Paul Wheatley and Marcel Rass as a sidebar. Some of you will know both of those names. And at that conference, the then director of the British Library, a woman called, momentarily forgotten her name. That's embarrassing. Anyway, the director of the British Library, Lynn Brindley, called for the setup of a shared endeavour. Lynn Brindley called for that in 2000. DPC was set up 2002 by eventually getting all the paperwork done. And working with partners internationally was always part of that ambition. That's why I kind of drop in that line about working with Marcel Rass early days, because it always had that recognition that there was going to be an international perspective on everything we do. And certainly, I can't remember a time before Nestor. So come right back at you there, Yvonne. As far as I can remember, we were always working together. There is a friendship agreement, and to put this in mind, we renewed the friendship agreement in 2012. So that tells me that it was in existence from long before that also. What we've found, and interesting your perspectives on this, what we found at the DPC is, having started with the memory institutions, that's the national libraries, the national archives, some of the big universities, broadcasters as well, of course, the BBC. Having started with that group who you just understand, think about long-term and have archives or have long-term memory requirements, it has quickly grown over that time since 2002 to include a much, much more diverse set of agencies who you wouldn't think of as archives or you wouldn't think of as libraries, but who have an archive or library sensibility because they need to maintain products and services over a long time. And that's why, as you now look at the membership of the DPC, it's grown 170 members or more now, but also much more diverse. And that, I think, is a really telling feature of the coalition. So a very diverse range of agencies and organisation types, 25 countries, 5 continents, broadcast, government, intergovernmental organisations, as well as the big national libraries and archives, also manufacturing, also banks, a variety of different infrastructure providers. So a very diverse set of agencies. I'm fond of telling people that Bacardi is a member of the DPC. It is exactly the Bacardi you're thinking of, nothing else. Why would they join a coalition on this topic? Exactly. They would join in this because if you want to sell 40-year-old bottles of matured Scotch whisky to the People's Republic of China, you need to be able to demonstrate that that bottle is from a cask that's 40 years old. And just at the point where you're importing that into the country, you don't want to be hacking around in some legacy stock management system to demonstrate this to a customs official in what will become your largest market in the future. So anyway, all sorts of reasons why digital preservation arises as a need, which are way beyond the classic understanding of memory institutions. And finally, about the DPC, we're now 14 staff. We've got paid staff. 14 staff in the UK, spread around the UK, mostly still in the UK, but with an office in The Hague. So we have a member of staff based in the Netherlands. We have a member of staff in Melbourne, in Australia, looking after the membership there. And last year, we also opened an office in New York, looking after our members based in the Americas. So that's the DPC in a nutshell. Sarah, have I missed anything important that you'd like to add to that history?
I don't think so. I'm delighted that you came out with your classic Bacardi tale, because that's, no history of the DPC is complete without that. No, I think you've got it all. You've got it all down.
So you're open to everybody who's starting to engage in digital preservation, no matter where, in which country. You're just open to everybody.
Yes, that's right. That was a kind of practical decision. When we were set up, actually, we were very focused on the UK and Ireland. And it was very much, we had inquiries back then from agencies around the world who wanted to join. But at that point, we said no, partly because we had a very small staff and didn't have the capacity to actually provide the sorts of help that people might need. But there was a kind of moment when we realized, and also at that point we had a number of different activities ongoing to try and support a couple of international endeavours. You might remember some of those as well. Yvonne working with the Alliance for Permanent Access, or some of the other big European projects, which were fun in their time, but they were sort of temporarily funded, as it were. So around 2015, the decision was made to say, look, there's not a British solution to this, okay? There's not a German solution. There's not a Canadian solution to digital preservation. It's a global challenge. And as a global challenge, let's try and scale to that global challenge so that we have a community which matches that. And we also became aware at that point, around then, of the products in digital preservation beginning to emerge. I don't mean to sort of sell any of these or to denigrate them in any way, but the Preservicas of this world, or Ex Libris, or Libnova, Artifactual. Some of these organizations sell products internationally, and so if we're going to, in the nicest way, hold those companies to account, help with the development roadmaps, help with the development of standards, help with the development of the capability to deliver digital preservation. So we need to be kind of scaled to some extent to those marketplaces in which they operate as well. So that's kind of around 2015, that decision was kind of made. When we reached a point actually just in early, probably the middle of 2024, we came to a point where the majority of our members are outside of the UK. So that was actually quite a small step, but quite an important one. I think it was Galway City Council, wasn't it, Sarah, that tipped us over the edge? Galway City Council joined the coalition, and that made us actually, for the first time, a majority outside of the UK, whatever the right word is for that organisation.
I remember it coinciding as well, also with sort of, you mentioned the European funded projects, William. So we were doing a number of those at a time when lots of people in the UK and organisations in the UK were. But we kind of, our focus changed at the same time that we sort of we took this decision to sort of take international members properly. Because at the time we wanted all members, wherever they were, to have access to DPC benefits kind of in an equal fashion. And at the time that we were focused on, or doing a lot of European funded projects, we weren't able to deliver that. And so part of it was kind of like, oh, well, I don't even know whether we've got stuff to offer. But at the time of this shift, we changed our focus too, to making sure that was the thing that we could do. And we started to sort of focus on the resources that we had to offer, so that they could be accessible by members all around the world, wherever they were. And so that kind of made it a bit more of an equitable offering, and much more of something we were confident about, and something that we knew would be useful, because that was, that's the end goal, really. There's no point doing it if it's not of any use to anybody.
Did you ever reach out to a specific community, like saying, okay, we need more museums because there are not enough in our in the DPC in general because we need that perspective or a specific area in the world, or did you just let everyone come to you as they want?
A bit of both. But I was remembering quite a concerted effort probably around the time that we're talking about here, so 2015, where we noticed interest from more kind of commercial organizations, if you like. So I'm not talking about the vendors here. I'm talking about not your traditional memory organizations, not the universities, not the libraries, not the archives that we've seen turning up and being part of the DPC traditionally. And so we kind of took a look at who was showing up and went to talk to them. So there was a concerted effort to talk to the banks, for example, because they kept showing up at DPC events. We were like, hey, talk to us about what you're doing. Here we are. Here's what we have to offer. And actually, just starting that conversation with them was really fruitful because they realised that what they were doing was actually quite by other names, perhaps, but it was digital preservation, and they could start a conversation themselves with some of the other members and learn an awful lot, actually, and their perspectives were really useful to those more traditional organisations as well. So the coming together of those different perspectives has been enormously useful for everybody. So yeah, at some points we did sort of identify groups and start conversations, but in other ways it has been largely organic. William, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good summary. We had these workshops. Do you remember we used to run this roadshow? We might well reintroduce that. We used to run this kind of roadshow. It would be kind of once a month, fairly open invitation. Whoever wants to come one day, talk about digital preservation, meet some of your local colleagues and build some of your local network. And looking at the attendance lists, I think we charged like £20 or something. It was really subsidised, really accessible, really easy. And that was where it became apparent that banks, that insurance companies, that engineering companies, all sorts of manufacturers were coming to our workshops, and we didn't know why. So we spent time speaking to them. And as Sarah says, we then recruited them. Also, if I may, it's also obvious to me this isn't just a one-way direction, though. I remember doing a workshop around the preservation of computer-aided design. And obviously our members were looking at computer-aided design, and other related, mapping products and so forth, which they had to preserve in the memory institutions. But guess what? Actually, in the aviation industry, there's very good standards around the preservation of aviation data relating to airframes, relating to engineering data, and consequently, it's a two-way street. So it's not just these commercial agencies coming and learning from the memory institutions. Actually, they bring an enormous amount of expertise to our group as well. So that's true in the music industry, it's true in aviation, as I say, it's true in architecture. There's all sorts of different parts of this sector who are bringing their own expertise. And isn't it lovely? Isn't it just the most encouraging part of the coalition? How open and willing people are to share that expertise with each other, to each other's mutual support and benefit.
Yeah, that's the spirit. Share because there are so many things that can just go bad in digital preservation and that are really difficult to solve. And that's why I'm pretty glad that the community is rebuilding itself on Blue Sky and Mastodon, because the other thing, we won't name it anymore, is dead. So, and that was really useful, just posing questions, like little questions, and get some fast help. And you also have this website, and I've used your website pretty often to explain things that I'm not an expert about, like email archiving. You seem to have several topics to just explain the basics of digital preservation for certain things. For everybody, not just for members. It's for everybody. It's just there, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So it also, very technical, small detail, but quite important about us is the DPC. 3-4 years ago, we qualified as a charity. So the DPC is a charitable organisation. As a charity, we actually are required to show public benefit. Okay, so we're a membership organisation, and members run and make the agenda and set us in our direction of travel. But everything we do has to ultimately demonstrate some public good, the greater good, which is why, for sure, members help with the process of establishing what the headlines will be, set the agenda for where the research they feel is needed. But all of that ultimately finds its way to the public, finds its way typically onto the website, and therefore freely accessible for whoever wants to use it. And one of the ambitions has to be that we make more of that available to yourselves in German, for example, or maybe we find some way where we can amplify the work that you're doing back to our community and our members. We'll maybe get into that.
And I think one of the things we recognised as well, and I think, Yvonne, you wanted to touch on kind of newcomers and the offering for newcomers anyway, is that the resources that the DPC makes available are not just like the super technical, really kind of complicated stuff. Like, we recognise that people doing digital preservation are all at various stages of their journey, if you will forgive the phrase, but they are. So some people are just starting out. Some people have been doing it for ages and have loads of experience and have loads of technical capability. But what's nice is, again, it's a coming together of perspectives. It's a community thing, because newcomers bring new ideas, and the people who've been doing it for ages have got all this experience that they can share. But when you put that together, it brings, the result is the DPC, basically, and we're able to produce resources that speak to everybody on every stage of that journey. So there's the Novice to Know-how training, for example, which was funded by the National Archives here in the UK, but has been made available freely to anybody who needs it and wants it and is interested. And that kind of can start as the first step on the ladder, get you just acclimatized with the language and familiar with the concepts. But what we found is that the people who are sort of active members of the DPC within their organisations, they share it, and they send their IT staff on Novice to Know-how so that they can speak the same language, if you like. But then there's things like the rapid assessment model. We call it the DPC RAM. It's a maturity model, but it sets a fabulous benchmark for like establishing where you are. But not only that, and you might be right down, at level 1 or 2, and that's fine, because everybody starts somewhere. But it provides you with a sort of a step-by-step kind of roadmap then for making progress. And at every step of the way, there's another DPC resource to help you kind of take that next step or make that progress. So I think I've forgotten what my point was, but resources, the website, William's point about the charitable nature of the organisation means that we're trying to cater for as broad an audience who are interested in digital preservation as possible.
Regarding newcomers, funnily enough, I used your digital preservation handbook in order to prepare for my job interview. So I was so much a newcomer. Yeah, you cannot be a newer-comer, I guess. But it was really helpful, so thank you for that.
Excellent. Well, you'll be interested to know, and listeners may be interested to know, that there's work afoot at the moment to produce a new version of that. So while the content is still great and useful, we need to sort of bring it up to date. So there's work going on to do that too. And as well, I think as part of the plans for that, William, you mentioned translations. We are planning to make it available in more languages too, so that hopefully it'll be more accessible to those who are interested around the world.
I am under the impression that currently in Germany or German-speaking countries, there are many institutions just starting to think about digital preservation. Do you experience the same development in the UK and other countries?
So I'll maybe have a go at that. Yes is the answer, and there are two reasons for that. I think, as we've observed in many institutions, the libraries and archives, museums, kind of got to this topic first because they understood it and they knew the long term was coming. I think there's been a maturing in the digital domain more broadly, and the organisations who perhaps 15 or 20 years ago were beginning a process of turning business processes into digital workflows are now facing a point where they're reaching the end of the life of some of those digital services, but the products that they're selling, the products they're maintaining, are surviving way beyond the digital infrastructure that created it. And guess what? That creates, therefore, a digital preservation need, which is emerging in a different way in different locations. Also, though, Yvonne, if I may, you say lots of organisations are just getting started in digital preservation. I kind of think after like 25 years, right? That's 25 years I've been working in digital preservation. I still feel like I'm just getting started is kind of the point I want to make. The digital preservation it's not a noun, it's a verb. And it's a verb which is only ever just beginning. And I feel like the whole of the digital preservation community is still at the first noise of the D of the digital and digital preservation. You know, we're all at an early stage in digital preservation, which is wonderful. And no individual, I believe, maybe you have a different experience, I don't believe any individual can hold all that information in their head and understand all the contexts in which digital preservation could be applied or make sense. Now, some people are very expert and very knowledgeable. I don't mean to belittle that in any way. However, I think there's a huge amount we need to learn from each other. And that's, for me, the interesting part. I honestly tell you all, digital preservation is intellectually interesting, it's changing, it's challenging, it's engaging. But for me, it's the coalition part that keeps me coming every day, because there's a huge amount of engagement with the people around digital preservation is really the fun and the interesting part. So maybe just to develop that thought a little, it seems to me that the digital preservation community involves quite a large number of people, a growing number of people, as you say, but many of them are working in isolation. So you have a big organization, a big manufacturing company or a broadcaster or maybe a couple of thousand staff, and maybe only one or two people with an interest in digital preservation in that particular environment. So you have quite a large, quite widely dispersed community, mostly who are working in isolation that's very fragmented. And that means for the coalition, our biggest challenge is to try and keep that community working and talking to each other, because it could be easy for each of them to fall into their own little kind of context and not have the opportunity to meet and greet and to speak with their colleagues and keep up to date with all of that information. So thinking about the growth of the coalition, you mentioned the handbook a moment ago. So here's just a factoid, a little drop into the conversation. When we first published the handbook in, I think it was 1999, it was two authors, Neil Beagrie and Maggie Jones, who both also have a long history with the coalition. The second edition of the handbook, which took, 2016, 35 different named authors. And that points to the diversity and the diverse knowledge and the diverse experience base in the way that the community is growing and expanding.
So how do you do it that you are welcoming the newcomers? Because digital preservation is so complex that some people are just overwhelmed and they won't pose any questions because they are too afraid yet to ask anybody anything. and they are just sitting there isolated in their offices and struggling with digital preservation. Not everybody just goes out there and try to meet people. And so how do you get to talk to these more introvert people?
Well, it's a continuing task. Sorry, Sarah, you're head of community, so this is your department.
Sure. Well, I was going to say in terms of the membership, and so these are organisations who have already kind of committed to being part of the coalition, right? Even within those organisations, we recognise that there are newcomers and there are experienced people. So one of the ways that we do get to talk to them is we specifically invite them, the junior members of staff, the early professionals, the newcomers to digital preservation, to come to our annual members fora. Like, that's for them. It's for the people who do the stuff. The more senior people, the decision makers, they're welcome too. But it really is like a practical exchange of information and who's doing what and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and getting stuck with something and just asking the room like what they've done. So, and we've been told that these events that we run annually, and this year, by the way, in 3 different locations, one in the Americas, one in Europe, and one in Australasia, they've been described as a safe space and a brave space. So you might feel shy and you might feel introverted and you might feel like you don't have a place to say these things, but we've been told that, I was going to say kind of by accident, but it's not kind of by accident. It's the DPC's ethos is to be so welcoming and so open and accessible that people do feel comfortable talking to each other, talking to the other members about all of their worries, and it works. So that works. That's one of the ways. If you're not a member, though, one of the things that kind of spun out of pandemic times was a thing called DP Connect. So that is similarly kind of informal, welcoming. In fact, it's open to everybody. You don't have to be a DPC member to come along to that. It happens on a Friday. In fact, this Friday, the 6th. Oh, heck. I don't know what time your podcast is going out. Every Friday afternoon, European time, we have a half-hour session and we just talk about whatever. And we've had, haven't we, William, like students studying digital preservation have come along and asked questions of practitioners about what they do. We've had people come and sort of treat it like a bit of a water cooler moment. You are working in isolation, and you need someone just to thrash an idea out with, and they do. And then it's members helping non-members, it's non-members helping non-members, it's everybody just helping everybody, basically. And I think that's the great thing about our community, is that generosity of people give their time so willingly. I came from a very different commercial background before I joined the DPC, and I was amazed that how willing people were to help each other. It wasn't a competition. In fact, it was better if they helped each other get a leg up. So we do find that in pretty much all of the things that we do. So I would say it's the ethos of the DPC to kind of, and it does enable, it does facilitate those kind of conversations, and we make sure there are spaces for quiet, introverted people, for people who are newcomers, for people who are more experienced. There's a space for everybody, basically.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I also joined the DP Connect several times now, and I always enjoyed it. It's great.
Yeah,
things.
I mean, you could talk about all sorts, can't you? It's like you never know what it's going to be. That's quite exciting, and you can meet people from all around the world. So it's a really interesting thing to do. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And how do you solve the problem that we always run into when many people are working together? And there are so many different people with different values and different backgrounds. So how do you avoid conflict?
Are you going to go?
I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try this one, but come in. So, first of all, we recognise the dynamism of the community, and we expect that diversity. We expect that diversity also to expand and to grow. So we have to be prepared for that. We have, in the context of the DPC, we have a common set of values. Those values are actually kind of formally in the mandate, and when you join the coalition, you sign up for those. But also explicitly kind of articulated more or less at the start of every meeting is the warmth of the welcome, that we have for you is the warmth of the welcome we expect you to extend to others, So to listen respectfully and to understand that people do come from different contexts and different environments. How do you avoid conflict is you're only ever as good as your last meeting, there's always a risk, there's always tensions potentially. I have to say, in the history of the DPC, we've managed to avoid much of that conflict. I would observe that people who are in the coalition are there because they want to be. They're not forced into the coalition. Our members call us into existence, in a way. It's entirely voluntary. We don't sit with a big government fund behind us or any power to impose or to enforce any of our standards or any of our expectations in that form. So there's a certain easygoing, you've already selected your participation within the DPC before you reach there. But I guess fundamentally it's respect. It really boils down to that. You might know I come from a background in archaeology. I studied archaeology. I didn't study library or archival science or computing science. I ended up having to look after large quantities of data over extended periods of time, and that was a real challenge. And I discovered there's all these other people actually working on this topic. It was a moment of discovery for me, and a very welcome one too. But that doesn't mean to say I don't also then have something valid to contribute into the discussion. And I feel that's true of everyone, whether they've come from computing science or engineering, or whether they're a subject matter expert in their own discipline. I really do believe, we have a member of staff who's a copyright lawyer by training. And so there's a very diverse range of needs and expertise. And if you listen long and hard and carefully enough, you'll benefit massively from that expertise.
I was going to say something similar. So I was going to say, I think conflict is okay. Like, you want discussion, you want disagreement, because that's where kind of new ideas flourish. If we were all sort of swimming in the same direction and just accepting, whatever we were told, then I don't think we would develop as a field. So you do need those. Conflict is probably not the right word, but those constructive arguments, perhaps. But as long as those constructive arguments take place in a respectful environment, and that's what the DPC tries to create, to make sure that, as William says, you listen and you respect that everybody has their place and everybody has something to contribute, whether they're coming from, wherever they're coming from. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. And I've said before in this conversation, it's the different perspectives that really make the coalition. We're not kind of all from the same background type. We're not all from the same organisation type. We're not all from the same place. And it's that diversity and likely kind of difference of perspective that brings the richness to the conversation. So we welcome it to a point, as long as it's done respectfully and, productively, I think.
So I guess there are at least two forms of conflict, like the sort of conflict when I think it was at a conference like 12 years ago, and Paul Wheatley and David Rosenthal were arguing in front of my poster if you have to convert PDFs at all, and if format obsolescence is a real thing, or we don't have to care about it. And they had different opinions about that. So that's like constructive conflict. But you can also have this kind of conflict that doesn't really bring you forward about digital preservation, and that only hinders that you really talk about your content and your real working problems.
Exactly.
But you would never run into these kind of conflicts?
I think I mean, yes, they happen. They happen all the time. But I think we do our very best to kind of facilitate and provide an environment where they happen as infrequently as possible. We, as William said, we set out our values at the beginning of every meeting, everything, every time we get together, and the way we are as people, I think, contributes to that, because we I like to think anyway, we're all really kind of warm, friendly, welcoming people, and that kind of sets the tone as well for a lot of the activities that we run. So we kind of practice what we preach. We listen, we learn from others, we respect, and I hope that by sort of modeling what we say we would like to happen, it happens as much as it possibly could. I don't think you can ever eliminate the non-constructive conflict, but if we can sort of provide that safe space as much as we possibly can, then that's going to be the most constructive approach, I think.
I would add as well, maybe structurally in the nature of digital preservation, success is always later. Success is always deferred, and very few people can confidently say they've got all the answers and they can demonstrate that their approach is the best. For them to demonstrate their approach is the best means they have to have gone into the future, and therefore it's wise to listen to competing voices and to evaluate those, and maybe even take on board multiple, and maybe there is room for multiple and competing, even contradictory approaches within one preservation system, on the assumption that you need to take mitigation towards risk.
Yeah, I explicitly noticed that in your meetings and conferences, and so I really enjoyed it. It's really, I think, not constructive conflict is also demotivating, and so it was just joining your meetings and initiatives and so on was motivating instead. So that works really well from what I've seen.
And you always seem to have time to answer questions. How do you do that? It was a very busy conference, and I met William, and I asked him, William, I never know what to tell the people when they ask me what I do as a profession, like when my dentist asks. And I asked him, and he was like, I haven't found a good answer either, so tell me when you found something.
Yeah, it's true. I think we all have like different versions of ourselves that we kind of, one for the dentist, one for the, the people that you meet at the conferences. One I tell my mum because I have no idea. She wouldn't just get it at all. I think that's fair enough. It's a complex kind of set of things that we do, and I don't think it ever stays the same. I think that's why it's so interesting as well. So even if you did come up with the answer, like, it would probably evolve, wouldn't it, over like a year or so, and you'd have to go back to the drawing board and think, what is it I do again? But yeah, we've had this conversation ourselves within the team many a time.
You also have so much going on, kind of like a lot of working groups, I think, because ZBMed is not part of DPC, so we are not exactly working in working groups, but I see the announcements and so on. Lots of little things like DP Connect and so on. How do you achieve this level of participation of members and not members, I guess?
Well,
is it just happening?
Yeah, maybe I'll have a go at that, and Sarah, come and join me with thoughts after. So, firstly, the DPC's programme of work comes from our members, right? That's, I suppose, the key. Our members get together and they tell us what they want, and our plan follows what the members have mandated. And the mandate, the members tell us there are 5 things for us to be working on. And everything we do is essentially a response to that request from the members. Community advocacy, workforce development, good practice, and good governance. So everything in the DPC falls into one or sometimes more than one of those headings. And to pick, you mentioned the special interest groups, the working groups, for example. There are quite a few. There's a working group on digital forensics, which met today. In fact, there's a working group for the registries of good practice. There's a web archiving task force. There's a whole variety of different. There's a new environmental sustainability working group. So there's all these different groups. They've arisen because members have asked for them, not because we've imagined them. So it begins with a call for, could the DPC step in and do something here? And if you look closely at, Yvonne, you've mentioned our Technology Watch report series, for example, and they're great. They're really great reports. Help yourself. Now, the thing is, to read the reports on that website, the Tech Watch reports, you wouldn't learn everything you need to know about digital preservation. What you see in that library are the things our members have asked for. And they've asked for it because no one else is doing it, perhaps, or they've asked for it because prioritised it because actually there's another body of evidence, another body of advice somewhere else, and actually our time is better spent on other things, So we try to meet the needs of our members. We try to avoid duplicating work that others are already doing and doing really, really well. We try to celebrate and amplify that work, like the work you do in Nestor, we should return to. And at that point, then we can convene things around where there may be no existing group or infrastructure or kind of think tank. And if we do that, recognizing or thinking always about what our members need, then we're, I wouldn't say guaranteed an audience, but we know that there's a need before we've started it. And if we know the need exists, there's a greater likelihood that it will have energy to carry it forward. Sarah, is there anything you would add to that?
You asked about the balance between I think you were asking about the balance of things that were for members only and those which are open to anyone. It comes, DPC events, as opposed to the closed working groups, have always been pretty much open to anybody who's interested. DPC members can come along free of charge, of course, because they've essentially paid already. And we just ask non-members to participate for a small fee. So that's things like the thematic, what we used to call briefing days, but are now just the thematic events. So the ones on AI, the ones on digital, preserving email, or, stuff like that. Anybody is welcome to come along to those. And again, we welcome that because we want that kind of richness of conversation and input. But we do reserve, of course, certain conversations for members because I suppose because they're closer maybe to what the members have asked for, and they've asked for them to be kind of these working groups, these closed conversations for now. But I fully expect that they will open out into more public conversations or more community-focused conversations once the members have kind of got their ducks in a row, or they've explored as much as they want to explore, or if it's a task force, they've completed the task and they've got something that's ready to show the rest of the community. So that's kind of how it works. And even with other resources and like the Tech Watch reports, they remain closed for members for a while, and that's so that they have the opportunity to kind of comment and observe and raise concerns about any of the research or the content that's gone into them. So they have that kind of editorial sort of oversight, I suppose, because ultimately it's the members who have commissioned the work in the first place. So that's kind of how we approach it. But because of the charitable kind of component to the organisation, ultimately, I think you'll find that everything kind of makes its way out eventually. But the members are the ones who are they drive the conversation, and they're part of that kind of first part of the conversation.
Yeah, so I suspect that it's everyone is going to participate because I also get something from it, because I need some kind of technology what needs to work on this topic anyways, and then people are joining, and end effect benefits all.
Yes, yeah, that's the plan.
Good.
So we are nearing the hour. If you have something to say to a probably mostly German audience, this is the chance.
Well, I think maybe I'll go back to what William said earlier in the conversation about digital preservation being a global challenge. So there's no British approach, there's no German approach, there's no Australian, American approach. We're all facing the same challenge. So it does make sense that we face it together. We share ideas, we share solutions, what's worked, what's not. I mean, obviously, there are going to be contexts particular to working in Germany, but I go back to the fact that, different perspectives provide huge value wherever you are. So it kind of helps to talk outside your context sometimes, to kind of figure things out and see what other people are doing. So in terms of our kind of our international goal, including Germany perhaps, is to make sure that we've got a coalition that's scaled to match this digital preservation challenge, that our members can benefit from the learnings and perspectives from all around the world. And we do this sort of with one eye on keeping a balance as well between the local and the global, or the regional and the global, if you will, because we do also recognise that there's a place for getting together with people who work in those same contexts, and this is why we had to have a bit of a break with it over the pandemic, but we've returned to our annual members fora that I mentioned earlier. But we used to meet face to face for our thematic events, of course, before the pandemic. Most of what we do now is online, so you can access them the events wherever they are, wherever you are in the world. And we're trying to do better at putting the events on in time zones that are more available and accessible to people around the world as well. But we're kind of focusing on getting together at least once a year in those kind of regional spaces, to kind of make sure that people do have that kind of local-ish support. I'm talking continent-wide though, so it's not quite your next door neighbour. But again, it's that kind of network support. It goes back to that sense of community that the DPC sort of strives to create. So we would love to include more German members in our European, I was going to say corner of membership. I don't even know how to describe it, but we'd love to welcome more German members into that, and to welcome you into those kind of regional conversations as well as the global ones too. William mentioned sort of celebrating and amplifying existing work as well. So we, Nestor DPC, have always had a good working relationship, and we hope to continue that by working together, by sharing the work you're doing, hoping that you will also share the work that the DPC does, celebrating each other's work, amplifying each other's work, making sure your members know what we're doing, our members know what you're doing, just for that very kind of purpose. And And also, we'd like to do better at translations. William touched on this as well before, and we do offer certain resources in other languages, but this is very reliant on a volunteer kind of basis at the moment. But we'd also like to know, what German resources should we be translating back into English or other languages for the rest of the world? Because, I mean, I'd be no good at identifying that because I don't speak German, but you do, and so you can tell us, what's good, what's hot right now, and what should we be telling the rest of the coalition about. So these are just some of the ways that I think that we could work together, and we'd like to work together. William?
Yeah, I mean, you've said everything very clearly and very well, as always, Sarah. Maybe to summarise, the warmest of welcomes is what we offer. If you've got a question or an interest, we're here, and we're always interested in finding out more. We'll benefit from the conversation ourselves. So just to be sure of the warmest of welcomes, that DPC, wherever you are in the world, in whatever context, we're a friend and ally to that digital preservation topic. So don't be afraid and don't wait. We're here. So the warmest of welcomes to the DPC as and when you have the need.
That might be a great title for the interview.
And a good closing statement as well.
Yeah. Many thanks for talking to us today.
That was good fun.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Katharina, for the invitation, right?
Yeah.
And thank you for allowing us your time and introducing us to some of your audience. But can I also just thank Nestor for all its years of work? It does an amazing job, an amazing kind of catalogue, track record of activities that hold such promise and are so necessary. So thank you for all of that work, and keep it going. What can we do to support that? That's the other question for us.
Thank you.
We certainly talk again. I'm quite sure. Yes. So, talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.
Bye.